It's a really interesting mix of fantasy and science fiction. Hey everybody, it's Eric. Welcome back to D3 Reads, or if you're new to the channel, welcome. Here we like to talk about all things horror, science fiction, and fantasy, though sometimes we throw in some other genres just to make things interesting. Now we're working on a couple of videos over the next couple of weeks as spring comes to an end and summer comes roaring in. And I thought I'd share that with you because it's a really interesting mix of fantasy and science fiction, plus some nonfiction coming down the road. And if you've watched our videos at all, you know we like to kind of group things topically, right? So we got videos on classic science fiction, gothic horror, cosmic horror, vampires, and military science fiction, etc. And one of the topics we're working on now is one that I'm really excited about. We had a poll about it on our channel a couple of weeks ago, which is best fantasy and science fiction humor books. Now, there's some big names that are obviously going to be on there, you know, Douglas Adams and Terry Pratchett, but there's other names as well. So if you know of any fantasy or science fiction authors that write great humor, let us know. Drop it in the comments. The first book I want to talk about today is right in line with that. It's probably the oldest book that we're going to be talking about today. Most of the stuff I'm going to be discussing is pretty contemporary, but it's John Scalzi's Redshirts. You can see by the jacket, this is a library book. I go to the library whenever I can. It keeps things a little bit cheaper. My wife gets a little bit aggravated, I think, with the number of books I tend to buy. But now, John Scalzi, as most of you probably know, is the author of Old Man's War. But he writes a lot of satire and a lot of humor as well. And Redshirts is a great example of this. I've been looking forward to reading this for quite some time, and I couldn't get a hold of it until suddenly I stumbled across it in my library. This book satirizes this whole idea that is kind of a meme now, actually, from Star Trek type fiction, where you have the heroic officers of a spacefaring ship like the Enterprise. In this case, it's the Intrepid, and it goes out boldly exploring the universe and what have you. But you have the Redshirts, you know, the kind of like the cannon fodder that always goes out there with the captain and the primary leaders of the spaceship, and they wind up dying. And so the main characters of Redshirts, Andrew Dahl, Ensign Andrew Dahl, and friends of his who are also new officers assigned to the Intrepid, they kind of start figuring out that the Redshirts, or the low-ranking officers that go on these land expeditions, or these away missions from the ship, they tend to die quite a bit, and they try to figure out, okay, what are we going to do now to survive this? I've just started reading it, so I'm only really a couple chapters in, but it's a lot of fun so far. It's a fantastic concept, and I'll give you a complete book review here in a couple of weeks when we do best fantasy and science fiction humor authors. But John Scalzi's Redshirts, published in 2012. Let me know if you've read it and if you have, and what you think. I know John Scalzi has his fans and his detractors, so I'm curious what you thought about Redshirts. I did read his book Starter Villain that came out, I think, in 2024, and I enjoyed that quite a bit. So I think this is going to be a good one. But I'll let you know more about it once I finish it. Next on is a science fiction / fantasy, and this is a very well-known book. I think it is Matt Dinniman's Dungeon Crawler Carl. Now, I heard about this a couple of years ago, and I've kind of been putting off reading it just because I wasn't sure what to make of it. I thought it was some kind of just fantasy book that was just based on role-playing game. I didn't realize it had the science fiction aspect to it. So just in case you're not familiar with it, Dungeon Crawler Carl tells the story of the Earth after aliens have come to it and basically leveled the planet. All structures, all buildings get basically smashed into the Earth. So there doesn't seem to be, at least in the early stages of the book, because I've just started it as well, doesn't seem to be any buildings left. And only the people who are outside of structures survived. And they get a notice from these aliens who represent something called the Syndicate that their planet is now being observed in a kind of a game show, I guess, where the survivors have the option to go into the earth and explore these levels, these dungeon levels, basically like a Dungeons and Dragons type scenario. And you have 5 days to survive every subsequent level down to the maximum level, which I think is 18. And if you happen to survive, then you get this big reward based off of the resources of your planet, and you can reclaim some of the planet and that kind of thing. I'm still learning about the rules of this book. It's a funny concept. It seems to be a mix of science fiction and fantasy, so I guess it kind of counts as both. It's a super popular book. I'm looking forward to reading. I think Matt Dinniman's got quite a number of sequels to this. It came out in 2020, and I forget how many sequels he's already got out there. I've been looking forward to this book for some time, and again, once I finish this will get rolled into our humor, fantasy, and science fiction video that we're working on. But if you've read Dungeon Crawler Carl, or listened to the audiobook, let me know what you thought. I am very curious how this is going to play out. So those are just two of the books that are going to be rolled into that best science fiction, fantasy, humor authors. Quite a few that I've already read that I just want to collect my notes on so I can make those proper recommendations for you. But I've also got in the works another best fantasy video that we're putting together. And to that end, I got my hands on The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. Now, Joe Abercrombie, of course, is a very well-established author, very popular, and I've never read any of his books. So last year, I think I heard this was coming out, so I signed up for the pre-order so that as soon as it came out, sure enough, the day it came out, it's sitting there on my front porch, and I'm looking forward to checking this out. This is a fantasy story, but also historical fiction. The main character, I guess, is a priest at the Catholic Church, and he gets assigned to a parish that apparently is made up of all sorts of wretches. And his new flock is made up of murderers, practitioners of ghastly magic, and outright monsters. And apparently he gets tasked with some kind of job that pretty much requires his relying on this kind of motley band of creatures to get it done. So that's about all the plot that I'm aware of. I've seen quite a few reviews come out at it, which I try not to read until after I finished a newly published book like this. But it seems to be getting some pretty strong reviews just from the little glimpses I've seen. So Joe Abercrombie's The Devils, this highly anticipated fantasy historical fiction book, we're going to roll that into an updates to our best fiction works video here probably later on into the summer. I like to try to cast a broad net when I'm doing these and try to read authors and books that I hadn't had a chance to, and then because I had just finished the Murderbot series, or mostly finished it, the Murderbot series, I just enjoyed it quite a bit. I actually got my hands on Martha Wells' Witch King. Now, Martha Wells has written a variety of books and genres, science fiction, fantasy, etc. And I guess this is her first fantasy book in 10 years. And this one sounds really interesting. The main character in this appears to be someone by the name of Kai, and he gets murdered. And after he's murdered, his consciousness is somehow dormant, and it's captured in some kind of water trap. And he awakens to find that some kind of wizard or mage or something is trying to use him for something. So Kai has got to figure out what happened and try to solve, I guess, the mystery of his own murder. I think he was a bestseller. It was popular there for a while, so I'm a little late to the game on this. This one was published, actually, though, only a couple of years ago, 2023. So Martha Wells has got this really amazing gift of telling stories and making, I guess, her characters relatable. I'm looking forward to seeing how Witch King pans out, and whether or not we add it to our list of recommended fantasy books here later on the summer. And so those are the fantasy and science fiction books that I'm working on. But every couple of months, I try to update best military science fiction. On our webpage, damper3.com, we have a couple of lists. One of them is for military science fiction. We call the Ultimate TBR, where we try to put on all the books that we've read or have been recommended by you all. And I think I've mentioned a couple of times now that John Scalzi, who whose book Redshirts I've already talked about. He is coming out later this year, I want to say September, with the latest of his Old Man's War series. And so I'm reading the rest of the series before that comes out. So now I'm on Ghost Brigades, which is the second of the series. I read the first one long ago. I just never finished the whole series. So the Ghost Brigades, I need to try to finish it and the rest of the Old Man's War series before the next installment of the series comes out. So John Scalzi's Old Man's War, the Ghost Brigades, and then I'll be trying to tackle the other 4 outside of this. I think he's got 6 out now, with the 7th coming out here in September. So quite a bit of reading on my list. And as though that's not enough, I've got a couple of nonfiction books that are on my plate now for a very specific reason. You see, I enjoy reading about the Civil War. I got my master's degree in military history. And here in a couple of weeks, my family and I are going to the Battlefield National Park for Antietam. And because of that, I am rereading a book that I read years ago called Landscape Turned Red by Sears. And it's about the Battle of Antietam. It's the bloodiest day in American history, Civil War history, or history at all for the United States. And absolutely fascinating read. I look at it from a kind of a military intelligence perspective, which was my background in the military, because a lot of key things happened during this. Those of you who are familiar with history might have heard the story of the 3 cigars, where that private just stumbled across, this Union private stumbled across these secret war plans that General Lee had issued to his officers. He had a certain number of copies, and a private just walking along picks up these cigars with these plans wrapped around it, and it could have spelled the end for the Confederates' attack in the North that was going on at the time, but it didn't. Anyway, Landscape Turned Red. It was a really fascinating book when I read it years ago. So I'm rereading it now so that it can be fresh in my mind when we go up to the National Battlefield Park here in a couple of weeks. Because of that, I'm going to be updating I think about a year ago, I published a video called Nonfiction That Reads Like Fiction, because there are some history books that are so well written that when you're reading it, it comes across as something that could have been made up. The author can take something that often comes across as dry or academic and present it in such a way that you just sucked into it. So a couple of months ago, when I first got onto Blue Sky, I posed a question to Book Sky, which is like their book community, and I asked them, or I gave an example of a book I'd read. It was called River of Doubt by Candace Millard, and I said that this book was so well written and so engaging that I was looking for other examples of books like that, right? Where the author is just able to present history in such a way that it could easily have been made up, and or a work of fiction. And so it reads like a novel. And to my delight, Candace Millard, the author of River of Doubt, she responded to me, and she recommended, among others, The Demon of Unrest by Erik Larson. Now, this book tells the story of the first shots of the Civil War that took place in South Carolina at Fort Sumter. And so all the things that kind of coalesced into that initial spark that eventually set fire to the entire country. And it starts off fascinating, where it compares the anxieties around President Lincoln, the newly elected president's certification of his Electoral College win in Congress, and he compares that to what happened on January 6, 2021, and from there it sets kind of a grim tone. I've heard nothing but good things about Erik Larson as an author, and this book in particular, so I will be reading that and then updating this with a couple other books that I'm looking at here in a couple of months on nonfiction that reads like fiction. That's it, guys. I got a lot on my plate coming in the summer. What are you reading? What are you reading this summer? You got any plans? Let me know if you got any recommendations. It could be fantasy, it could be science fiction, it could be horror, or it could be nonfiction. What are you reading? What do you enjoy? Let me know in the comments. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. We'd love to have you around. Thank you all so much. Once again, enjoy your book. and we'll see you next time.